Hello and welcome to tonight's Cooperation Live event. It's brilliant to have so many people joining us this evening for our Cooperation Live. My name is Emma Foody. For those of you who don't know us, I'm Assistant General Secretary for the Cooperative Party, and tonight we're going to be talking about how a future Labour and cooperative government can and should deliver on cooperative growth. Across the country, we know that there's an urgent need for that better, fairer, greener economy that we all want to see. We also know that the co-op model is really ideally placed to play an important role in just delivering on that ambition for everyone. And to play a greater role in delivering that, the sector needs to be supported, to be able to grow, to be able to deliver on that agenda. And so we want to and need to double the size of the cooperative sector in order to spread those benefits throughout our communities across the country. And that's what we're going to be talking about this evening. Before I introduce my speakers this evening, I just wanted to do a few kind of housekeeping bits, a few tips on how to make sure the call is as interactive as possible. We do record these calls and make them available on our YouTube channels. So if for any reason you don't want to be seen on the call, you can of course just pop your camera off. But we like to make them accessible because we know not everyone can necessarily make 6 o'clock on a Wednesday. So we want other people to be able to access them at all as well. We also, everyone is on mute at the moment as well. That's just to prevent any background noise, any disruption to these calls. And after we've heard from our speakers this evening, we will have time for just a few questions. Some have already been submitted, which is fantastic. But you can submit them in the chat box. It is being moderated, and we'll go through as many as we can for the rest of this evening. But on to introductions. As I said, we are joined by a truly stellar lineup this evening. I'm really grateful to our panelists for joining us for the event. So we've got Mick Whelan. Mick is General Secretary of the trade union ASLEF, and he's also Chair of Labour Unions. Mick's going to share his thoughts on co-op growth, and also hoping he's going to cover a little bit on the priorities for the Labour unions as well, which are going through the current National Policy Forum process. We're also joined by Denise Scott-McDonald. Denise is President of the Co-op Group National Members Council, as well as being a Labour and Co-op Councillor on Greenwich Council, and of course being a Cabinet Member for Health and Social Care. And she's going to be talking, I'm hoping, about the need for co-op growth, why we want to see it, why it's so important for our communities. And we're joined by Emma Hoddinott, our very own Assistant General Secretary at the Cooperative Party. And Emma's going to be sharing more on the work which the party's doing on this area, how you might be able to get involved, and how we can ensure that cooperative growth takes place, well, those important ingredients which are needed. So without further ado, I'll hand over to our first speaker, Mick. Mick, over to you.
Thank you. Good evening. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity to speak to you this evening. I'm proud of the work I've done with the Cooperative Party down the years and been inspired by it. And the long history of the Labour movement and the affiliates and the socialist societies, the cooperative movement, lent us to where we are today. That got the first Labour government into power, that got us into a place where the authentic voice of working people could be heard. And I think after 12 years of austerity, communities need that again. I think when we look at the current inflation figures, we know that the top 350 FTSE companies are running at 89% profitability. That's not translating into investment in our communities. That's not translating into investment in our workforces. That's not creating the better quality jobs for the future that we need everywhere. And the vision of the Cooperative Party and how we do that to a degree of mutuality is something I've always subscribed to. And I'm quite proud of the work that we've done. So over 10 years ago, we did a joint report with the Co-op Party about running Scotland's railways as a mutual. And that gave the groundwork that's led to the nationalisation of the railway in Scotland today. I don't believe we'd be there politically if we hadn't have highlighted what we could do, if we actually built our railways around what our community needs are going to be, where our housing is going to be in the future, when we're going to build our future businesses, how are we going to create those transport hubs and give a better future to everyone that's going on. And I look forward to doing that sort of work again. And then the idea that in this day and age that the profit stays within the hand of the few and isn't shared, right, it's anathema to me and to most trade unions. So when we talk about future growth, I know it's the aspiration of the Co-op Party as well, it's about the quality of work that we have. Not only about the green transition, how we're part of it, and we create the new jobs, but we treat those quality jobs, but also at the same time, we take away those bits of legislation that create the imbalance and the lack of power within our communities. We take away the 0 hours, we take away the inflexibility of working and make work pay once more. Because we're actually at a point in time, because of that 89% profitability of the top 350 companies, where work isn't paying in the UK. It doesn't matter whether you're in the public sector or you're in the private sector, we need to rebalance the economy. And only a vision that allows people to share in their future, to share in the wages and the profits, and to grow businesses in a different way. Now, if we have to form new legislation to do that, for the Green New Deal, for where we need to go as a movement, and it is a movement. I don't see a separation between the trade unions, civil society, the co-op and the Labour Party. I see that as a group of people that have always moved in one direction for a greater commonality and a greater good. And we shouldn't be battling each other. We shouldn't be fighting each other for our policy over somebody else's. It's about how do we promote the policies that we jointly subscribe to, that we need to make where we need to go. So we already know that the Labour Party is going to bring forward a Green New Deal. We know that we want to have a greener economy that offers those more secure jobs. But how do we convince people it's the right thing to do? So we have to look at initiatives that are out there, those within the Co-operative Party and those that are shown that help our communities. So we've seen in Liverpool, Steve Rotherham, he built train stations or built stations in deprived areas. And immediately businesses moved to those areas. Immediately people went to live in those areas that didn't live there before. Immediately then you create demand for more businesses, more schools, more support, more connectivity. You create the opportunities for these new models of business that we'd like to see everywhere, that everybody then shares in the growth in the community and reinvests in the communities and the cities in which they live in. So I think that is, whether it's community energy schemes or greater worker ownership, the cooperative movement has a vast role within this. Now, also we know that traditionally co-ops are more resilient, because people are working together. They're working and they're willing to give the time and effort for that investment, for that generation of surpluses. I won't call them profits, no one like, right? For the and those opportunities that growth brings for future jobs, future investment, whatever to happen. We know that the short-term hits of banks where they don't want to lend, and we particularly saw that in the banking crisis where they lent to each other, and all of a sudden the opportunities for small business and other growth dried up. We can't have that. We need a model that allows people to share in their futures and where they need to go. And we need much more mixed ownership across the country. I'm not saying private good, public bad, or public good, private bad. What I'm saying is, what do we need? We might need different things in different areas. We might need a different mix, might need a different balance. But unless we create the opportunities that investment to happen and create those cooperative strands that allow us to take that forward, how are we going to do it? And maybe we'll have to be quite radical. Maybe when we get into power, we will have to change the finance system. Maybe we'll have to change and create that green investment bank that tends to lend to the sectors where we believe will be more resilient and give it that growth. And I think that as a Labour Party is something we should and could do. The trade union movement, we provide real hope and leadership. For us, it's not about tomorrow. It's about the day after. It's about the next generation, the generation after that. I very much am one of those who believe if you build infrastructure, then you generate for everybody. I believe that any wing that builds and offers the opportunity to people to grow, right, and to share in anything makes us better both as communities, but as an economic entity. And we learn from experience. We've learned that austerity doesn't work. We've learned if we don't invest, there is no greater good. We've learned that the transnationals will just cut wages and conditions to fund their profit when their profits reduce. So you need businesses that are willing to grow. And we know that, forgive me for this, I hate the terminology, but it's ordinary working people who spend. It's the people that have disposable income that put it back into those businesses, back into those opportunities, whether it be in tourism, whether it be in hospitality, whether it be in manufacturing, whether it be in shops or whatever the areas that we grow in, the new ideas we might need in the tech sector. Why aren't we developing our own systems and feeding the generations tomorrow for the ideas that I probably don't even understand, right, and can't even contemplate? But we should be giving our kids and our grandchildren those opportunities. And then we rebalance the economy. Then we create that difference in scale between the 1% and the 99%. And we create an evening up of where we need to be. And then would we still be talking about leveling up? You know, leveling up shouldn't be about rich areas, geographic areas being more powerful than others. It should be, what does every community need? What do we need, and what do we as trade unions and social society need, right, to help the cooperative party develop the policies and support them going through Parliament that give people the opportunity. People don't want charity. People don't want food banks. People want the right to self-determination. They want the right to be able, right, to put food on the table, pay their own rent, pay their own mortgage, and give their kids and their grandchildren a future. Right, they want to do that, and they want to know that either through the education that we give them or the opportunities we give them, that that's going to happen. So I think supporting the cooperative movement, as it's always done in its aspirations to do that, is the right way forward. But also, then people have to have a voice, and the one thing that the cooperative movement does, it gives everybody a voice in what they do. In any enterprise, anything that happens, it is the people within that enterprise that control it, that operate it. I mean, you're always going to have a notional boss at the top, says the boss of a trade union. But the fact is, it's the cooperative party and those ideas that will empower people, give people the opportunity of what's going to happen to them in those areas to which you develop, whatever. And surely that's the ultimate form for a trade unionist of engagement, that the people involved have the voice and say of their own futures and create their own futures and create the futures for others. So I support the doubling size of the cooperative sector, and I do like what's happening in the European economies. I think we could learn, and you'll hear me banging on about people doing the lost leaders that we need in transport in Germany and Spain and elsewhere to regenerate their economies. One of those 4 factors of communication gets people or goods or businesses right out and about for the greater good and generates the local economy and national economy, I see as part of that cooperative vision and part of that movement. So I know it will take new legislation. I know that we have to be bold, and we have to be bold when we get into power, and hope we get into power in 2024. And we take with it, as part of the green transition and the New Deal, the vision and the ideas of the Cooperative Party that lend us to a greater investment bank, a greater investment future, but an investment in our future and future generations. So I hope you support this ambition as well. If I've rambled on a bit too long, please forgive me, but I'm passionate about what we can do mutually. I'm passionate what we can do as part of the Labour Party, and I'm passionate about what people can do for each other and for the future. But thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that, Mick. That was a really inspiring contribution and a really pertinent reminder, as you say, of those common ground that we have between the trade union movement and ourselves within the Labour movement, and what we can do together as part of that. So thank you. I'll hand over now to Denise.
Thank you, Emma. Thanks. Oh, that's great listening to you, Mick. It was very inspiring for me to hear that. And in fact, I know we're asking for a doubling of the co-op economy. I think we should go higher. I think we should be much more ambitious. And I know Emma, the other Emma, we had a meeting with Rachel Reeves at the co-op conference, and that was one of the things we actually raised. I think we should go for more than double, but you know, I'm happy right now just to settle, but I think we should go a little bit more. And if we look at other countries across Europe, they have a much bigger size economy dedicated to cooperatives and all its shapes and all its forms. So I'm here. I feel like I'm in co-op world 24/7. I have this very unusual life. I'm president of the National Members Council, which, if anyone knows anything about it, it's 100 members that sit as part of a democratic part of the co-op group, which is, you know, the biggest cooperative in the country. And at the same time, I'm also a councillor in Greenwich, and we're a cooperative council. And so both jobs, my day and, if you want to call it, night job, are in both in cooperative. But it gives me this different picture, one in local government and one operating in a very, very big £11 billion revenue company, you know. So it's very different world of how to operate in the cooperative. But I'm actually really proud, and I think I'm very fortunate, because you get these two different pictures and two different ways of at the heart of it is being cooperative, but it's a different approach in different ways. And I totally think there should be more cooperatives, and I think it should grow. So one of the things which is really important is that cooperators are about solving problems. And even if you look at the beginning of the co-op group, it started with the Rochdale Pioneers. You know, it was started with people not being able to get good quality products, you know, and bad quality food and goods. And that's what's amazing about the cooperative group, is that it has its beginnings at trying to resolve something that was a problem in the economy and in people's homes and people eating. And it's still doing that job today in all its shapes and forms. It does fair trade now. It's a big champion of fair trade and was one of the first retailers to adopt that fair trade. It does a lot of things to do with, which is now being called ESG. So now that, you know, all the PLCs and all the businesses, big businesses are talking about this ESG, which some people are calling not whitewashing, greenwashing, but, you know, environment, sustainability and governance. The Co-op group was doing it a lot earlier than everybody else. You know, so that's what's really great about now. We're ahead of the curve in so many ways in that area. Not only that, as a lot of the companies are PLCs and they have to worry about shareholders. We don't. We have to worry or concern ourselves with our members and making sure the members' voice filtrates all the way through the organisation in all its shapes and form. So in the group, the Co-op group, we have the council that does some of that. That's 100 members that represent people from all across the country. And from the council, as well as members writing in, as well as our AGM, as well as we have join-in events, so we hear members' voices. Then there's other work that goes on to make sure we keep our eye on the different voices that are out there. But from the council, I can say, we've done a lot to promote sustainability, which has been on the heart of many council members, which has been going on for some time. We've done a lot to do with, especially when George Floyd thing happened, the chief exec at the time came out and was one of the first chief execs to say we are an anti-racist organisation and made some commitments. But not only that, we were the first to come up with a fair tax mark too. So there's lots of things that came out of the council that we could do as a business. And then now that's in Angel Square in Manchester, and then further down south in London, in southeast London, in Greenwich, we're a very different scale, a lot less money, and lot less money, and different regulations controlling us. But as a council, we're still on that journey. But again, we signed up to the fair tax mark. Whereby we look at our procurement in all our different departments, whether we look at children's services, look at adult and social care, whether we're looking at different provisions for the council, we're looking at our procurement line to see how we can make it much, one, sustainable, but two, there's all sorts of things like anti-slavery and all that sort of, make sure all that stuff is embedded within there. We also do things proactively. So we do a holiday hungry club, whereby we support an agency called the Greenwich Development Agency. Now, this agency was set up a few years ago, but its job, it is a cooperative and we support it, but it works on different types of food related projects. So it works on things like the Holiday Hungry Club. During the pandemic, they were very instrumental in cooking food and delivering to people who were self-isolating. At the same time, they also have a business angle where they work with local people to help them set up local businesses and help them set up cooperatives. So we do all sorts of things like that at a much smaller level. And and also as a council, we're also exploring the idea of setting up a cooperative commission, because we want to make that next step in looking at different areas in our council, how we can be much more cooperative. I think one of the things that's important about being a cooperator, if you want to use that term, is its values and principles. I know it's written down as part of the International Co-op Congress, and and as a cooperator, it's branded on my back. But they're really key to doing business, whether you are operating at the big scale level at the Co-op group or whether in local government. It's about embedding them in everything you do and how you deal with your partners. And sometimes so in Greenwich Council, sometimes we will have serious conversations with our anchor tenants in our borough, if you want to use that. So we'll have those conversations. We can have those conversations with the hospitals. We can have our conversations with the big educational institutions. We don't have that many big businesses, but we can have those conversations with those big institutions and say, what are you doing to embed values and principles in what you do? And if you want to keep trading with us or doing business with us, we want to see more of that. So it's using those relationships, but also we work out things for smaller business too, so that you have to operate slightly differently. So on our high streets, we're trying to work with local businesses to actually help them to do things like pay the living wage, where we actually fund maybe a starter in a small business so that they can help them start paying a living wage to their staff. So there's lots of ideas going on there at local government. But the reason why we need to do it is because even I've got some stats here. The Elderman Global Trust in 2020, 53% of people who took part in their polls said that they would favour, they felt like capitalism was failing and was doing more harm to the economy. The Institute for Economic Affairs, 67% of millennials and Zoomers, I call them Zoomers, say that they favour a socialist and economic system. They felt like it was much more fairer. Even at the co-op group, some stats here, on average, 40 to 50% of new members joining the co-op are under 36. So more young people are getting that blue card because they see value. But here's another thing that's a little bit worrying is yet 54% of young people in the UK, and this was done by Co-ops UK, could not mention a name of a co-op. So there's a bit of work to do out there so that they know, because they may even have a blue card or be a member of even GLL, our sports company that's around the country. It's a cooperative, but people may not realise that they are part of a cooperative. So it's important to get the message out there. And sometimes as cooperators, we don't do a good job of saying, of talking about our is it USP as people call it, and saying what's good about it. So yeah, hope that helps.
Thank you very much for that, Denise. I think there's some really important points in there. One, of course, that important reminder of the benefits actually of the cooperative movement and of cooperatives and what it brings to our communities, to society and to individuals as well, whilst also kind of setting out, as you say, that kind of challenge at the end actually, and you know what we need to overcome to make sure that these benefits are shared out much more across the country, and we really shine a light on them. And on that, I will hand over now to Emma, who's going to talk a little bit about how we can hopefully achieve exactly that.
Yes, and a tough act after those two great speakers. Thank you very much. But I hope to touch, I think, on some of those really important points, because we're at a certain moment. We all know about the chaos that the government is in and the opportunities that we may find ourselves under a Labour and cooperative government. And for us as cooperators and also in the wider Labour movement, it's a huge opportunity for us to shape the country that we want to live in and for us to shape the economy that we want to live in as well and create that long-lasting change that we want to see. And for us, we know our co-op sector can flourish. And as Mick said, you just need to look at our international counterparts. We know there is huge untapped potential in this country. We have a great diverse co-op sector. You heard from Denise at the co-op group. You know, there are big multi-million-pound co-ops, but also your co-op can be a local village shop as well, local services, freelancers coming together. We've got a wonderful diverse sector, but we know we could do so much more. So Germany's co-op sector is 4 times the size of ours. France is 6 times larger than ours, and they form a much bigger part of their economy as well. So the Netherlands, for example, it's 18% of their GDP is the cooperative economy. Here in the UK, it's only 1%. So we have got an ambition. We want to double the size of the cooperative sector in terms of the number of co-ops, so from 7,000 to 14,000. And Denise is right, once we get that underway, our ambitions can go much further. But that is the aim for now under the next Labour and Co-op government. And I think we can see from some of the work that's already been done from places like Greenwich, where they've got their development agency, we can understand what needs to be done to bring about that potential. And some of this is sort of bottom up, but actually quite a lot of it is from having that right framework set by government in terms of the policy, the finance and structures as well. And excuse me, because I'm dying from a cold at the moment. It's hot, it's going round. But I just wanted to pick up that piece that Denise said. It was quite shocking that so many people didn't know there were what a co-op was, or if they're a member of a co-op. And we need to make it a much wider understood form of business. As cooperators, we get it, we're all here, but we've got a job to tell other people why it's so good and why it matters. It is about you know, that it answers to its owners, not the shareholders, that it has that concern for community, that it does have that concern for the environment and that wider rooting in place than other forms of business. And there are things that we can do to help that. When you think, you know, there are probably tens of thousands of students taking business courses in universities. We need to make sure that the cooperative agenda is on in business courses, that people are learning about that form of business. You know, I think there's some opportunities as Wales redevelops its schools curriculum to make sure that every child understands what a cooperative is and that it is a fairer form of business there. So there is something around that education side, but we know there's something around business support as well. A lot of our business support in this country is very traditional. I imagine if you went to business support saying, I want to set up for business in this, they would tell you that this is how you register at Companies House, this is how you do it. There'd probably be little information about how you could create a fairer and more sustainable business through another form of creation. And that has to change. I'm really proud of the work that's been done in South Yorkshire under the Mayor Ollie Coppard, where he's running the South Yorkshire Ownership Hub, which is embedding cooperative business advisors and actually training your regular business advisors in what a cooperative business is and how people can start one up, but also how they can convert as well. And I'm quite excited. Tomorrow I'm going to be visiting a building firm in South Yorkshire that has converted to being employee owned. So they put in the business in the hands of the workers, and we know that creates better outcomes. The figures are there in terms of retention and productivity and sustainability of the business as well. So we need to make sure that you know, in terms of the business support offered in this country, that actually those providing it understand our model. And that's why we're calling for a network of co-op development hubs across the country, giving communities all over the place the tools they need to create these co-ops. And I think linked to that, there is a lack of awareness and understanding about how to start one up. And to be fair, having set one up myself, it's not easy at all. The current legal framework is a bit of a nightmare. It is not the easiest form of business to set up. And actually there are things that we can do legally, but also in terms of financial incentives as well, in terms of creating co-ops, that we know there are things that can be done as well. And because co-ops are set up differently, they need different ways of accessing finance as well. We need to look at the funding, the startups that actually are compatible with a diffuse ownership, rather than just this shareholder model that we seem driven to in this economy as well. So we think there are huge opportunities. We think there are things that government can do. And we think a network of these development hubs would really supercharge the development of co-ops. And we know in terms of looking at startups, new businesses, particularly in technology, there's opportunities there, and the co-op model actually works quite well. But actually some of existing businesses, we know there is a huge opportunity where family businesses are sort of coming to an end, where the family no longer wants to own the business, there's no one to hand it on to. Actually, those family businesses having opportunities and finance to pass that on to their employees and for them to own it and to take it forward, rather than it being sold out to some international firm or a hedge fund and it be stripped and it loses its connection to the place. Actually, that's a really easy win, and that should really be encouraged. But also we need to look at some of those sectors around social care and community energy. We know there are co-ops that are doing amazing things in those sectors, but we know there could be so much more. So that's our vision. I think it's a pretty exciting vision. I think it's something that we ought to look to bring about as cooperators. There's loads of examples of it happening already, and I guess as members there are things that we can do now, and that is to shout about the great work that's been doing. So the South Yorkshire Ownership Hub, Greenwich Development Agency, Hackney has just opened a co-op hub as well, you know, look at what the Co-op Party is promoting and take that back to your area. Ask your local councillors what they are doing locally to support cooperative growth, because so much can be done now in preparation for that step change from a government as well. And then as we come through Labour Party's policy process, CLPs will be receiving the sort of submissions ahead of conference as well. Have a look at those policies and make sure that the Co-op Party's policies are reflected in those. Talk to your representatives about how we can make sure that Co-op Party policy is reflected in the next manifesto. This really is our opportunity, and I'd urge you all to take it. And with great partners like Mick and Denise, I feel quite excited about the future.
Thank you so much for that, Emma, and just a big thank you to all of our speakers. I think we've really kind of set the scene there as to why it's so important, what the benefits are to it, what the hurdles are that we need to kind of to clear to make this happen, and then also those really kind of practical aspects that you've set out there as well, Emma, as to exactly what it is that we're asking for to make this into a reality. And I think, as you said there, Emma, is that it is actually something that's really exciting. You know, we are all in this movement and in this party because we understand the benefits of cooperation and cooperatives. And, you know, one of the biggest compliments, but it's a backhanded compliment that we often get paid, is that, you know, the co-op movement is the Labour movement's greatest kept secret, because people don't know about it, but when they find out about it, they think it's the greatest, you know, that's such a wonderful part of the movement. And it is wonderful, but we don't want it to be a secret. And this is absolutely that opportunity to really bang the drum for the benefits that it brings our communities, and that we want it to bring all of our other communities up and down the country as well, and that this needs to be adopted as part of the policy platform going into the next general election. So I know some messages have already come through in the chat, so I'll do a quick round of questions and see where we get to for time, and hopefully there's a little bit of something for everyone within it. So there's a question here about, which is quite interesting and builds a little bit, Emma, on what you were saying about what is happening, in South Yorkshire, is the role of devolution. And as we see these kind of big mayoral authorities that are being created, big amounts of budget which are being devolved to areas like South Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, the new mayoral authorities that are being talked about in the East Midlands, in the North East, of course the West Midlands been there a while, all of these kind of opportunities, if you like, for us to again kind of see about bringing more kind of options and opportunities for the movement, and the question is really is how do we capitalize on those as well as that national picture, to see about how we can tap into those. Another of the questions which I think you started to touch on a little bit, Emma, was how we best lobby the Labour Party, and I'd be really interested to hear Mick's views on that, in particular as to with his involvement in the MPF and where that is in the cycle, and whether there's kind of other opportunities that whether it's local parties, whether it's through CLPs, etc., and how we can lobby the Labour Party and our elected representatives in it as well. And then a final one, which Emma and Denise might want to come back on, is a little bit about how we can involve societies in this as well, actually, in that, you know, again, they have many millions of members, and they have a platform in which they are able to kind of to talk about these benefits, and which they also might be able to help us with this kind of particular part of the agenda. So those are kind of the first three questions, and hopefully there's a little bit of something for everyone there, and feel free to dive in on each other's questions, so that we can get a real kind of share of voices. But Emma, if I come to you first and foremost.
Yes, absolutely. If I unmute, yeah, I'll touch a little bit on each of those, really. So the role of devolution, I think, is really interesting, but also huge opportunities as well. So we have a number of Labour and Co-op mayors already. There's Ollie Coppard in South Yorkshire, Andy Burnham obviously in Manchester, and Jamie Driscoll up in the North East, and Tracy Brabham in West Yorkshire, all at various stages actually Ollie's been very lucky to get the South Yorkshire Ownership Hub and the funding to do that, but actually I know the frustrations of some of the other mayors in trying to do similar things, that they don't have the money and the devolved powers to do that. And I think this goes back to a sort of huge question about how we can further devolution and make it meaningful devolution, set out the path for that fiscal devolution and to give them the powers. So if cooperative mayors do want to put together the packages that shape their economy, that make it fairer and promote economic growth, that they've got those, and some have got various bits, you know, around education, bit of economic development, but actually having the proper funding and powers to do that would be very beneficial sort of going forward. And I have to admit, I'm speaking as a northerner here in terms of, I understand the frustrations. You know, it's been ridiculous the way this government has dealt with devolution. The fact that areas of mine have got to bid into a big pot still for somebody in Whitehall to decide who gets what money and who doesn't get what money, and that's supposed to be levelling up, is completely bonkers. So I think we're all looking forward for a more sensible discussion about devolution that actually does hand powers and the funding down, so things can be looked at properly and shaped for that local place properly as well. Just on lobbying the National Policy Forum, in terms of, I'll stick a link in the chat, you can contact your CLP reps. So please do ask if they've seen. The Co-op Party has made lots of submissions to the National Policy Forum. We've made submissions to every commission, and we've particularly made submissions around doubling the size of the co-op sector. So go and talk to your CLP rep. They'll be getting the papers shortly, actually, next month, that'll hopefully set out the path and the policy that will go to conference this year, which is really important because it'll be the last conference, hopefully, before a general election. We boot this lot out. So hopefully it will set out our manifesto going forward. And then on societies, I think that's a really good point in terms of making sure that the views of our wider movement feed into that. And I know there is that shared ambition to double the size, but Denise is probably best talking about the societies with regards to that.
Thank you so much. If I come to Mick now, is there anything you want to particularly share, particularly about that lobbying the party aspect?
Well, this is the key moment for lobbying your MPF reps, both your CLP MPF reps, your trade union MPF reps. We're in the cycle now that we're in 12 months. We are going to conference on all the mission statements. We will form the policy going forward and drive where we go. So this is a key 12 months for everybody to get their voice heard. But coming back to the co-op mayors, on the bit of a plug, if you don't mind, on the 12th of this month, we're at the Mechanics Institute in Manchester. We're launching the Green Transport Paper with Andy Burnham, Mick Lynch, and all the stakeholders. I mean, that would something would drive the economy, that would drive, decarbonise, electrify, but green buses, green freight, shorter journeys, more freight hubs such as Wakefield, Daventry, and elsewhere to mirror your cooperative hubs and your development hubs. You know, what we want an integrated transport system. I don't see us, in opposition to buses or anywhere else. I have a few problems with planes and short haul, but that's a different debate. If you actually want to transform this little island that's 800 miles long, we have to do it in a collegiate and collective and cooperative way. And the way to do that is to create transport. Also, transport has to be affordable. I did see one of the questions in the chat about how young people can't afford to get to education, can't afford to get to work. I'm very much a fan of, I like the Luxembourg model. I don't think we'll achieve it in my lifetime, where all public transport is free, and where it's seen as generating for the local economy, for tourism, for business, anything that gets good services for people from A to B, one of the 4 factors of production. I see it's a no-brainer. But also it remains a fact, even now, that for every, before COVID, for every pound you invested in transport, you've got £5 back to the economy. It doesn't have to make a profit. because you're getting the return. Even in the post-pandemic world, for every pound you invest in transport, you're getting £2 back to the economy, and you're doubling your money. So investing the ability for people to grow, for people to get to businesses, for people to create the opportunities, to build the new houses where they need to be, surely is the vision where we need to be. So I think there's a massive opportunity in the next 12 months for us all to be banging the drum to create a different vision under the Green New Deal for where we want future generations to be and where we want their opportunities to be.
Thank you so much. And finally, Denise.
Thanks. I don't know. So in terms of the Labour Party, I'm not completely convinced that everybody is on board in the Labour Party. Some key people are, and some are not. I don't want to name names or anything. I mean, I've had some really great conversation. Look at Mick, he's telling me name. I've had some really brilliant conversations with some people on the front bench. And I've had some very disappointing conversations. But I think this is a great opportunity, and I don't think we should stop. I'm not saying this to stop it. I'm just saying to keep up the pressure with the different people and the relevant portfolios that cover anything to do with the economy, anything to do with transport, anything to do with that cooperative model having its role somewhere in the future. I think it's really important that we keep that pressure up through whatever avenues you do. I know, Emma, you were talking about the structures with the CLPs and things like that. I think you just got to keep that pressure up. Also, I think there's some work that needs to be done, and I don't know how much, even at the lower levels of the party, so that people can articulate what a co-op is and why it's important. I remember one time I was actually in a meeting with Joe Fortune and the societies, and Jim McMahon was describing the difference between Labour and cooperative. And he did it brilliantly. He said Labour sometimes is about everything coming from the centre and providing a solution, while cooperative is about coming from the bottom up. And I thought that was a really brilliant description of how cooperators are much better, are really good at that bottom-up approach, that local approach, and identifying what is needed locally so that they can resolve things locally. And I just think we've got to get better at articulating that. And so even in our CLPs and our meetings, you know, whatever you can do, they just articulate that and make it important, so that when different people have different conversations with different people in the front bench, they actually it can keep hearing that word. You know, the cooperative model is the solution for a better economy and a better life in so many ways. In terms of societies, and again, that's an area where we're going to need some work. I just came from, I mean, I was Emma, we were there at the retail, the other Emma, at the retail conference. So generally, a lot of them like the idea. There's a bit of work there. And some of them say they're apolitical, which I disagree with anyone being apolitical. But I think organisations like Co-op UK, which is that umbrella organisations that lots of co-ops sit under, and Rose Marley is doing a fantastic work there that's going on there. So I think some of the work she's doing to get co-ops to talk to one another, the societies to talk to one another. And actually we had Joe come in on the retail conference. It was a cooperative retail conference, and actually articulated what's going on nationally. And actually for the first time, Joe was really optimistic. And I've been listening to Joe for some time. And sometimes, yeah, the last few elections, you kind of go, oh no, it's really depressing. But actually he was so enthusiastic, which I think around the room, I heard people talking about, you know, this could be it, where we could actually grow the sector. But I suppose what I'm saying is the conversations have to keep going on. They have to keep going with the key people, the key organisations like Co-ops UK, Co-op Party, pushing that agenda and making and articulating the case. But we still have to get better at talking about our USP. So I'm frustrated because we're not very good at that. So
thanks very much, Denise. And I think just, you know, echo the sentiment which has been said really there around whether it's the Labour Party, whether it's our cooperative societies, or whoever it is it's up to us as cooperators to really carry this message and to make sure that all the people that we speak to, all the meetings that we're at, all the papers that we're seeing are talking about this, because this is so important for us, and so important for us to make sure that we deliver, that we need to really be the message carriers for it. I can see Mick wants to come back in there.
Yeah, I just spotted the question about finance. And I think that it's a key question. You know, we also the allied to not just being in the major metropolitan areas, but financing towns and cities that require it. I'm not quite sure the trade union movement at this moment in time is the wherewithal to become a national investment bank. But what we do need is a green national investment bank that invests in the areas which we're talking in, that could compete, that can actually generate and get so back. So while I'd love to think the trade union movement, which does, you know, give an awful lot of money to civil society and support an awful lot of good causes, I don't think there is that funding of the level that we're talking about without the change in legislation that we also need, that the co-op are promoting, to actually generate the funds and the monies that we need for all the things that we want to do. So I think part of Labour Party policy, there was always going to be a green investment bank, and under the 2017 manifesto, there was going to be a national investment bank. If we can get any form of that joined up thinking back in there, that allows the areas outside the metropolitan areas and the metropolitan areas where they need it. It's not exclusive mutually, right? That we can get the investment in the way in which we want to, in the areas in which we want to. I think that'd be a good thing. But I don't think the simple solution is just saying the trade unions get together at this moment in time to do it. I think the trade unions should assist. I think they should battle and fight collectively for what we all want. But I don't think they have actually at this moment in time the financial wherewithal to make the dent that we require.
Thank you very much for that. And I can see Emma and
Denise,
everyone wants to come back.
It makes a really good point about the financing and the need to look at the investment bank model, you know, as a much more sustainable way of investing, and some of that being sort of ring fence for the cooperative and social economy will be very beneficial as well. I think there's also a question about what happens with what we used to know as European development funds and which has been replaced by the Prosperity Fund, and how that can be better used, like you say, across the country, and have put to better use, really, to benefit all the country. And I think that was a really important point about rural areas as well, which was why we were proposing a network of development hubs to fit to the different communities across the country, and that includes rural communities as well. There is a whole set of cooperatives within the rural economy in areas such as tourism, fishing, agriculture, to just name a few. There is just as many opportunities there as in our metropolitan areas.
So I was just going to touch on finance, and I know Mick has said something, and Emma, you said something earlier on about finance. And at the retail conference, I was in a meeting with the society chief execs as well as the presidents, and we actually had a discussion about Labour Party and what would convince us, or what would make us, or what do we want to see from the Labour Party. And the number one subject was money, capital, finance, and how to help. Oh, look, there's a dog. Sorry. So, but the number one thing that came up amongst almost everybody was the money side of things. And I think the Labour Party could actually come up with some really good ideas about how they're going to deal with that, and how they're going to provide capital for the sector to expand. And for retail to do business, then I think that could go a long way with actually pulling in more of the societies and actually just showing business people of any size that they want to grow the economy. And it'd be interesting because in other countries, and I think it's Italy, I can't remember the other ones, they actually have whole government departments, and their whole job is to support cooperatives, or if the business is going out. And like you were talking, Emma, about family business, they want to turn the business into a cooperative. They provide that support, and that support comes right in. And so, you know, something like that would be really ambitious, but really cool.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Denise. And Mick, do you want to come on one final point?
Yes, I've just been corrected by the person who put the question in the chat, that the actual question was about education. Of course, any form of investment then should lend itself to being also encouraging the education, both in skill and intellectual and even artistic crafts, right, for young people, and the ability to grow into whatever area we need. I mean, I just thought a national investment bank or a green investment bank could give all those opportunities. I was speaking in the round. I wasn't ignoring the original question, but it's key to what we do.
Thank you so much for coming back on that particular point. We've had loads of questions in, so thank you so much. I'm sorry that we aren't able to get through them all. I mean, there was ones, we managed to get to the rural one. There was other ones on co-op values and principles. There was points around care co-ops. There was obviously more questions around that kind of rural versus metropolitan area and making sure that it's not one at the expense of others. So I'm really sorry that we're not able to get to every single one. What I will say is that this isn't going to be going away. We're going to be talking about this more and more. So there will be more opportunities to get involved, to contribute, and to have these types of discussions. So thank you for participating today. We've obviously had some fantastic speakers. We've had this really exciting, ambitious discussion as to where we want to go with co-op growth. And we got to see a puppy. So I don't think it can get better. So I feel like we should probably, just when I thought it couldn't, it does. The true star of the show. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening. We really do appreciate you taking the time out. And I hope you've picked up lots of different ways in which you can get involved so that we can continue to press for this. We can continue to call for cooperative growth as a real priority. Thank you all. I'll let you go. Thanks now. Take care. Bye.
Thanks.